Hello, hello. It is officially October. It is spooky season, and I'm really excited to share about my Red Riding Hood meets Jack the Ripper fantasy horror story. This is something that I don't get to work on all that often because I still have that other book to finish, and this is just kind of hanging out on the back burner, percolating in the background, and I desperately want to work on it. Today, we are here to talk about Red Riding Hood, Jack the Ripper, serial killers, dark fairy tales, and setting up your Scrivener file. If you're new here, I'm Dana. I'm an indie author, and under the name D.L. Pitchford, I publish unapologetically honest stories about real characters. I am a lover of all types of genres, all types of stories. Fantasy was always my first love, though. And, as far as horror goes, fantasy horror and sci-fi horror are my favorites. I love hauntings and demons and vampires and werewolves, and it's all so much fun. Red Riding Hood has been my favorite fairy tale for as long as I can remember. I think a huge part of it was I grew up watching the play Into the Woods. Red Riding Hood is the best character in that. I will fight anyone who says otherwise. She was my favorite. I wanted to be her. I also have a fascination with true crime, but especially the mythos surrounding Jack the Ripper. But I also find it really frustrating that all of the talk around Jack the Ripper is about who he is. It's this great mystery, but we never talk about the people that he actually killed, the people who are gone. It is never about the victims. It is about idealizing this basically mythological figure now. At this point, no one will ever know who he was. So the idea of this book is basically merging my favorite fairy tale with this mythological serial killer. So when you merge these two stories, what comes out of it is Jack the Ripper, this monstrous serial killer who attacks poor women in the streets at night, and he becomes a werewolf. This is the logical conclusion of smashing these two ideas together. This, I want to focus mostly on setting up my Scrivener file and talk about what is basically my story bible. Most of what I have for this story is a scene here or there, and a lot of ideas about the kinds of scenes and actions that need to happen in this story. I have, over the years, put together scene cards for stuff that I know, but I also know a lot of the stuff is missing. I have things labeled, so there are plot points and midpoint and that kind of stuff. So I have all of these, and I have basically the first chapter is written. And if I want to be able to work on this more, the next logical step is putting all of that information into my Scrivener document. So today we're going to be making a new Scrivener document for this project and getting it set up so that I can actually properly work on this. I have enough information and enough scenes that I can actually dedicate some time to finishing a fast draft or a discovery draft version of this. But to do that, we need to have a setup for that. So let's do that. Okay, let's get this ready to record. Okay, obviously we start with Scrivener. Scrivener has a lot of really good templates, including interactive tutorials. They have a really nice getting started section. If you need to know about Scrivener, that's where you will find out most stuff. You can do a totally blank one. They have fiction, nonfiction, script writing, miscellaneous, and you can make your own templates. Now, the novel with parts, and short story were all already there. This is the one that I made based off of the novel. This is the one that I have been working with for a while. Let's create that. This is how I have my novel template set up. The first thing is tasks. Any tasks I need to do, whether that's research or outlining what part of the project I'm on and need to be working on, that goes in here. I don't use this section as much as I wish I did, so I still have it here, but I do not often use it. The next section is the main manuscript section, which to start out, I have that divided into acts because that's generally how I work arc with my discovery draft, and then each of those folders has one scene in it as an example. When I get to later drafts, things get divided into chapters, and then the rest of these sections are basically reference anything I might need. I have my outline section that has guides. It has information about a 3-act story structure, the 7-point story structure, which is typically what I use. I kind of combine the 7-point and the 3-act. This includes the beat sheet from Save the Cat, which I don't often use. I do try to include sources. So information about the 7-point story structure, the source that I learned about that from was Dan Wells. 3-act is so well known that I don't have information about that. Yeah, so this character arc outline is from Take Off Your Pants by Libbie. And then I have a relationship arc outline that is inspired by Romancing the Beat and the Novel Maker's Handbook. These are things that I was twisting and tweaking. I don't necessarily use all of them, but I have them as reference points if I need them. Then this is for like all of the things that your first chapter needs. I do not have on here what the source for this is. I will look around and see if I can figure out what it is and add it in later. So those are all of the guides. Also in the outline section, I have somewhere for brainstorming. Then I have sections where I can fill out my story structure and my beat sheet. I have a section for the synopsis, and then I have folders for subplots to go into details about those. Since this is a template, there's nothing really there. And then I have like information about character arcs, so I can fill out all of that information. A lot of this stuff I don't use all that often, but I have it in case I need it. The next section is for revision, so that's not really applicable anytime soon. This checklist is basically my general guideline of the order in which I do things and tasks that need to be completed next to different drafts. So I divide things into a discovery draft, a rough draft, a revised draft, final revisions, and then of course publication after that. That is all specifically based off of the method that I have done things for my previous books. So this is again something that changes and evolves as your writing and publishing process evolves. Okay, I have a few folders. Here I've got a how-to section. This is how to troubleshoot a scene. I love that in Scrivener you can add in actual web pages, so I wish it weren't full of all the side junk, but it's fine. So this is KM Weiland's 8 Common Problems when trying to troubleshoot a scene. These are generally articles that I found really helpful. The other one I have in here is how to use paragraph breaks to guide the reader's experience, because that's something where you think it is very simple and straightforward, but there's nuance to it, and she does a really great deep dive into that. Those are the only two I have saved in here right now, which honestly kind of surprises me. The next section is about word choices. So I have a folder for descriptions, and I have links to writing with color. They have so much helpful information for how to describe different skin tones. This is probably also them. Yeah, hair colors and textures and lengths, like different words for it. Writing with color is amazing. Even if you're just writing white people, there's still so much helpful information in here for like description terms. Those are the ones that I have saved from them. This website is amazing. The next section is aromas and smells, and the source was worldfoodandwine.com. And this is just a list of adjectives to describe specific smells. It includes like descriptions and synonyms of similar things. Some of these are obviously more related to wine than anything else, because corky, smelling like cork, that is specific to wine, but that's just a good way to describe a lot of aromas and smells. I have this, which was specifically from like a cologne, fragrancex.com, which is just like a list of masculine scents. It was something where I specifically was like trying to figure out good ways ways to describe a specific character, and I stumbled upon this and went, this could be helpful. It definitely has been. I don't use it that often, but it is helpful. But it's also just like, this was something that was specifically designed for men. Like, here are the 5 masculine scents that can drive a woman wild. It's so dumb. Like, this is stupid. But the actual information has been helpful. This one is a list of strong verbs. This was specifically from kathysteineman.com. So, like, instead of using blow, use billow, blast. It's the same kind of thing that Emotion Thesaurus does, but this is for verbs and not, like, specific to emotions. So it's just a lot of very common verbs and then other ways to get that across. And these next 2 are specific to writing spicy scenes, so I might have to blur them. This one is specifically from Bryn Donovan's Master List for Writers. That's a really good book. This one, I typed it up myself because the web page no longer exists, and I did not save it prior to that, so I typed it up from the book myself. So it's divided into verbs, nouns, and adjectives, the important things. Intimate parts of the body. This is another one where I very specifically copied it myself because it had been taken down from her website. And I believe I did add a few things. So that's everything that I have in here to help improve descriptions. And I would, of course, add to that, like the Emotion Thesaurus and the Emotional Wound Thesaurus. Pretty much everything in that series of books works for this too. The next section is specific to me because these are my crutch words. Ones that, as I was going through, I was noticing I include way too many of these. Like, these are specifically filler words that I use and that I try to go through and see, is it necessary or can I improve it? The next section is generic verbs. That is pretty similar to the section on strong verbs. There's probably some overlap between those 2 lists. These are all words that I tend to overuse. They're not very strong, and it's something that I at least want to look at to make sure that I really want to use it there. Or would it be better to replace it with something stronger, something more specific, something more accurate? The next section in revision is for previous drafts. After I finish a draft, I select everything in the manuscript and move it down to this section in its own folder. So I would have a folder inside here that's specifically Discovery Draft, and everything would get moved into there. Sometimes that means I copy it, sometimes I start over completely. So no matter what I've changed, I have a copy of the older draft in my Scrivener file. Obviously, that doesn't need to happen right now, that can go back. My next section is for world building. My reference section includes, like, here's a spot where I have things to research. If I know I need to look something up, I can make a note in here and go back and figure out stuff later. This is a list of very common themes. This is kind of a combination of these 2 sources, practicalcreativewriting.com and literarydevices.net. Then I have references for characters. I have a whole bunch of common names. These are the most common surnames in the US. This is not necessarily up to date. And I tend not to choose names super high. I like to go in this area, like midway through, so they're well known enough that people recognize them, but not super common that it feels like I'm talking about John Smith. And then I have like 1,000 most popular girl names. This is specific to like 2017, so this either needs updated or just need to not care. And here's one for boy names. Here's a section for gender neutral names. So many of these, they're baby name websites. That's how it goes. And then I have a section that is Gothic names. I love that this is a thing that you can find. Then I have traditional Southern names. is literature-inspired names. And then I have sections on most common Black names, and I have stuff about Latinx names. So basically, any name that I might need for a contemporary US setting, I have information about that. I do need to add in here more stuff about like European names, London names, Victorian names. I need more information about that in here. And then I have a section on Myers-Briggs. This is specifically personalitypage.com, and it has lists to all the different personality types, and then a page on how it relates to sexuality, and then this is about like how the different personality types react to stress. Myers-Briggs is fake. Like, I do just need to add that as an addendum. It is not accurate, it is not scientific, it is not real. But when you're working with fictional characters and want inspiration or ideas on like how to flesh out those characters, these sort of things can be very helpful. This is about character archetypes, 8.5 character archetypes you should be writing. This is another K.M. Weiland thing. And then I have a section on people of color, which is just links to writing with color, because this is the helpful information. Like, anything you could possibly need, they probably have stuff on it. Then this one that is stereotyped versus nuanced characters and audience perception. Really helpful information if you're wanting to write people of color. Writing with color is the correct place to start. And then I also have empty folders that I can add to for specific things to this project. Like, I need a section on Victorian England. I need a section on fairy tales and folklore, ones that I specifically want to include. I might want a more detailed section on like Red Riding Hood. This gives me a space where I can put in all of that information. Even if I don't know what all I need, I can add to it slowly as I'm working on the story. That typically happens when I'm working on the discovery draft, but even after that, I still add to this stuff. The next section is characters. This one is relatively straightforward. I have section for protagonists and a section for antagonists, and then minor characters. Each character gets their own character page. I feel like I don't put a lot of information on here. I tend to just put the most important information on here. I don't use it as extensively as I could, and this definitely does not include like what's their favorite color and their favorite food, and like when you get that deep into it, why aren't you writing the book? I mean, if you want to, that's your prerogative, but that's too much for me. I want to be working on the story. This is name, any nicknames, when they first and finally appear, talking about their story role, what their goals and motivation are, if they fit a specific archetype, and then general physical description. I have a section for species because this is open to fantasy and horror and sci-fi, anything like that. I don't know why I have this labeled as orientation when I should have it labeled as sexuality. So yeah, physical descriptions, personality. I have a section for including their Myers-Briggs, other stuff like that. Like, I could add Enneagram, because that would... I'm not sure I spelled that right. It doesn't know. General section on background and backstory. I have those separate, but they definitely could be combined into one. Then sections about their relationships and their abilities, whether that's like magical powers, skills, or hobbies. And then I have a spot for a mood board for them, and a section where I can add in stuff about their Myers-Briggs or Enneagram, anything like that. The next section is location. Yet again, I have an index. This is somewhere I can add in all of the important details and link to the specific stuff. So I have location 1 here. If I go in here and click on this, then it will take me there. So name, alternate names, stuff about the geography, the demographics. A lot of this stuff, like if I'm writing fantasy, these aren't necessarily the demographics that you would be included, like what % elf, what % dwarf, what percent whatever thing you came up with. Stuff about the culture and notable history. This is definitely something that could be expanded upon because that is not super detailed. Then section for mood boards if desired. I also have a spot to add in a map, and you can make those location pages for any type of location. If you want to do it for a city, or go bigger and do it for country, or go smaller and do it for a restaurant or a specific house, a specific bedroom, you can get as detailed or specific as you want. And then the next section is for objects. This one is probably the least detailed, but I have it divided into weapons, non-magical objects, and magical objects. And then there is a page. Names, alternate names, the role, physical description, what its purpose is, how you use it, what the origin is. Again, like all of these things, I do not often go into this much detail because it is a little bit much for me and the way my brain works. The way I think about my stories is a lot more wishy-washy, but I like having the option to include this stuff. And a lot of times I don't fill out this information beforehand. These things get added in like as I'm doing my rough draft. Then I have a section for a timeline and a section for a glossary. That was all under world building. And then the next section is about publication, so that's not applicable anytime soon, but this is basically what genres to put it in, tropes, themes, like what do I want to touch on while I am making synopses and blurbs and that kind of stuff, or while I'm posting it. And then front matter and back matter separate for each. Acknowledgements about the author, that needs updated. And then a section for the actual blurb. Then obviously you have to have a templates folder so that you can easily add templates. I have ones for the story structure and character arcs and relationship arcs, and then also for the individual character location and object pages. So that is a general look at how I have my Scrivener file set up. I basically have my story Bible built into it automatically and add and update stuff as needed. Now it's actually time to get this set up for my Red Riding Hood story so I can actually work on it. I have all of these note cards to add in as scenes. They are in chronological order right now, and then I also have a prologue and first chapter that I can just add right in. So if I go to manuscript, I want to look at this as the corkboard, but I'm gonna be like inside it, so maybe not. This is relatively simple. I BS some kind of name just so I know what it's about, and then no, it helps if I don't talk while I'm trying to write because then I'm doing all wrong. So we can start with adding a couple of the first scenes. This is one sentence, and that comma shouldn't even be there. So that's the first scene. That I basically have that. Let me grab it from my Google Doc and paste it in here. This is almost 2,000 words. What I have, this is like the most solid part of it. I will also say before all of this, I need a section for the prologue, which will go before either act. And let's copy that. I can go in and add all the different scenes. Let's add a couple. These are like the opening scenes. There's not really any spoilers or anything. And yeah, I'm just putting like one sentence, so it's not that detailed at this point. It will get more detailed as I go on. There's a few scenes I need to add in more in a bit, but I do also want to go into the world building section and work on character. So, my main character, her name is Agatha. This was long before Agatha All Along and all of that stuff, and I'm honestly pretty annoyed that that happened and like super popularized the name, and so many people associate it with Marvel and that stuff now, and I'm just like, but I love that name, and why are you ruining things for me? Her name is Agatha Current, specifically with an A, and that is important because currants are like a super red berry. There are different colors. There are black currants, but they're basically like really small and really sweet, but they're also super acidic, but they are specifically red. And I really wanted her last name to be a name associated with the color red, but not like blatantly so. First and last appearance doesn't really apply to your main, literally the first chapter and the last chapter. That's how that works. I do not have a bunch of this information prepared. Her short-term goal is like to find out who's murdering all these women. That's her short-term goal, I guess. Long-term goal, like, what does she want to do with her life? Is that the kind of long-term goal we're looking for? I'm not sure how to answer these questions at this point, honestly. Inspiration. Red Riding Hood. Species. She is human. She is 18-ish. She is of age, and in Victorian time period that was typically like 17 or 18. The start of the story is her coming out into society. Birthday doesn't matter. She, like most of my characters, is bisexual. She's super white. She is blonde. Physical health, spry. She's very healthy. And part of that is because she is young and in a well-off family. She's middle class, which should go in here somewhere. I'll just put it there. Maybe it would be better in background. Daily routine, weekly routine, religion, spirituality. As an atheist, I genuinely cannot write religious characters. I don't know how to do it. It makes me uncomfortable. And it is one of those things where it's like, as a middle class white person in Victorian England, she would be Christian. I'm just going to ignore it though. I don't have to talk about that. Maybe church will be mentioned. It probably will be. That's just the nature of the beast. But she certainly doesn't care. A religious, technically Christian? Hometown, London, adolescence, these things. That certainly does not apply. Adolescence. She was shipped off to her aunt's home in the country to... This is such colloquial wording. But it is the wording that comes to mind. Basically, to put her in her place, to make sure she understands her role as a young woman, and to stop being hysterical and stuff. Don't do that. Oh, relationships, social status, that's where I have that. So the middle class part would go there. Family relations. Her parents suck. Romantic partners, friendships. She doesn't really have friends because she wasn't allowed to. Skills, hobbies, accessories. At some point she's gonna have a knife. Romantic partners, TBD. That's not true. It's just spoilers. See, yeah, at the start of stuff, this is kind of the information that I have. Myers-Briggs, she is probably an extrovert. She might be something like an ENFP. No, she's definitely a J. So I don't know if she would be an N or an S. That's probably what she is. I will have to look at stuff and kind of decide. A lot of times I will even take one of the Myers-Briggs tests as my character and see what it comes up with. Usually that's right. But personality, she is high-spirited and belligerent. Curious, enthusiastic, /passionate. What does she want? Freedom. Not to Get Married Off. That's a short version of stuff. Other characters, there are a few different characters. John Shaw and Edwin Shaw, who is John's younger brother, and the other major character, I'm not sure I have a specific name for her, but she works at a newspaper. She is like trying to be a journalist, but it's the 1890s, so that's hard. She and Agatha become friends, and I'm considering whether that becomes romantic at some point. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I do need to have one for Grandma. That's important. And I also need to have one for the Beast. I'm not sure I have a name for her grandma. Beast, so for species, werewolf. And so much of this is just stuff unknown. It's a werewolf. It's a monstrosity. I could also make ones for each of her parents because they do play a rather large role. The only other person that really needs one would be, I believe I named him Bertram Gold, and that is the person her parents want her to marry. Those are the main characters. I don't have enough specific locations to really add anything to that section. Objects, I don't know if objects will play a huge role in this, but also if you're talking Little Red Riding Hood, the cloak, the cape, the hood, like that is the iconic image, so I probably should have a section for that. So that's just the start of getting this Scrivener file set up. I still have a whole bunch of scenes to add in, and I also have notes and snippets of other scenes. There is so much to add to this to get it in a shape where I'm ready to like fully dive in. I wasn't planning to record anything more for this video, but I've taken the past few days to expand on what I have in my Scrivener document, and I wanted to share what it looks like now. I'm going to get my screen sharing set up, and then we can take a look at everything. Just to start, I did remove the task list. It's not something I use all that often. I like it being an option there, but I've used it maybe once for all of the books I've worked on. This is now divided into chapters. The red here is for Act 1, and that's the only one that has a legitimate chapter. The rest of these I have expanded my minimal notes to include full scene outlining. There are 17 chapters in Act 1. That's insane. Orange is my major plot point, so that's the first plot point. Purple is Act 2. These are the midpoint. 35. Chapter 35 is my midpoint, so that means there should be about 70 chapters. I think this is 50 something. There's the third plot point, and then blue, I have 6 chapters. So much more is going to happen there. The next section, I do have some notes here in my blurb ideas. This is something I copied over from an external document, so I actually have not looked at this section in depth. This is a 100-word blurb. After discovering a young girl's mangled corpse on the streets of Victorian London, Agatha Curran's family institutionalizes her. This is outdated. That's not the plan at all. The victim, a 15-year-old girl no one knows or cares about, looks eerily like her, and Agatha is determined to discover the perpetrator, no matter the consequences. With the aid of spirited reporter Ruth Moreland and local philanthropist John Shaw, Agatha seeks to uncover why young girls are vanishing from the streets of London, why the bodies, if they reappear, look like they were victims of an animal attack, and why a leisurely walk to visit her grandmother has become so dangerous. She does not get institutionalized in this. It is something that I was considering for a while, but that is not in the plans right now, but otherwise, that's relatively accurate. There's brainstorming outlines. I do have a section for a series outline because this is something I desperately want to be a series, but I also don't want to fully commit to that. I worry about biting off more than I can chew. I have a lot of loose ideas for future books. The second one would be Dracula inspired. Generally a lot of references to other fairy tales and gothic horror and combining them. And part of why I'm not sure how the series would play out is because I had intended one of the characters to be a long-term romantic interest, and I don't know if that is how it's going to play out anymore. It would be interesting to have a Red Riding Hood retelling, a story that is specifically about a girl's relationship with men and being sexualized by men, and then have her endgame love interest be another woman. I like that idea. Story structure, a lot of this stuff still isn't filled out. I do have a synopsis here. Again, so much of this was old content that I pulled from different locations and finally put into one spot. And let's see, most of this I don't have any of that filled out. And here, yes, I have the discovery draft thrown together. It's just individual scenes set under each act. Part of this was also a short story. It was included in a limited time dark fantasy anthology that is out of print now, so I have that in here too. In the world building section, I have added a section specific to Victorian names, and that's where all of those are, and this gothic baby names section got added in there. There's information about Gaslamp fantasy, different versions of Red Riding Hood. This is Perrault, this is the Grimm version. This is an article about female sexuality in fairy tales. This is an article called Moral Warnings and Sexual Implications in Red Riding Hood. And then this is more Red Riding Hood symbolism. Then some content about Jack the Ripper. One of the characters is also based off of Jack and the Beanstalk, so I have some information about that. I have information about blood moons. I have a bunch of information about autism because one of the characters is on the spectrum. What I need more is information about how that was dealt with in Victorian times. When you try to research that, half of the sources talk about how autism didn't exist in Victorian time period. And it's no, it did. We just didn't call it that. I do have this stuff about hysteria and women's asylums because that is, at the very least, something that gets threatened. I expanded her stuff some, but again, not a lot. I looked at Myers-Briggs stuff in more detail, and basically I couldn't really decide whether she is an ESFP or an ISFP. ESFP is the entertainer or performer type. Yeah, ESFPs live in the world of people possibilities. They love people and new experiences. They are lively and fun and enjoy being the center of attention. The more I look at this stuff, I realize she might actually be introverted, and that might also just be because I don't know how to write an actually extroverted character because I'm not. She is a people person, but she doesn't necessarily want to be the center of attention. So the other option is ISFP, which is the artist or the adventurer. Life itself is a canvas for self-expression. From what they wear to how they spend their free time, they act in ways that vividly reflect who they are as unique individuals. They have an exploratory spirit and the ability to find joy in everyday life. That honestly feels more like her. They live in the world of sensation possibilities. They are keenly in tune with the way things look, taste, sound, feel, and smell. They have a strong aesthetic appreciation for art and are likely to be artists in some form because they are unusually gifted at crafting and composing things that will strongly affect the senses. They have a strong set of values that they strive to consistently meet in their lives. I do lean more toward that one. It just feels more like her, so I will move that to the top. So that's what my Scrivener document looks like now that I've had the chance to go in and flesh things out. This is way more than just note cards now, and that is really nice. Hopefully this has given you some ideas on how you can organize and update your Scrivener documents. I am always updating and improving the way I use my Scrivener documents and the template that I use for my novels. And as I've worked on other projects and finished books, I have updated and altered this template so that it is as functional for me as it can be, but I'm always looking for improvements. So what I'm working on this month is getting this story into better shape, and we can do a deep dive on everything that goes into doing that, everything that goes into making this story what it is. I want to go over all of the reference books that I have used and am using for this project. I have so many. I've read a lot. I have even more than that I haven't read, and of course I am working on reading some for my personal curriculum right now. And most of all, I want to talk more about how the story has taken shape, what all of the inspiration for it is, and dive deep into the heart of this story. Keep an eye out for my next video. I'm going to be talking more in depth about this project and fairy tales in general. See you then.